Well, hello. Today we have an interview here with Brian McKeown from the FASB, and let me give a little background to Brian. Brian is a technical assistant with the Financial Accounting Standards Board based in Norwalk, Connecticut for the past roughly 5 months now. He has a master's in accounting science, a MAS degree from the UIUC, which was in May of 16. He also has a bachelor's degree in accounting from UIUC in May of 15. And I'm very proud to say he was a Bronze Tablet recipient, one of the top 3% in his graduating class. He's won numerous other awards and scholarships. And most importantly, Brian was my teaching assistant for the spring 2016 semester, and he was quite honestly one of my best ever. So with that, welcome, Brian.
Thanks a lot, Greg. I really appreciate you having me.
Brian, if you could, tell my students a little bit about your current role with the Financial Accounting Standards Boards and what your current primary job responsibilities are.
Absolutely. So for those of you that don't know, the FASB is an independent private sector, not-for-profit organization that is recognized by the SEC as the designated accounting standard setter. And so with that, my current role is a postgraduate technical assistant. So all the views that I'll be discussing during the presentation are definitely my own, don't represent the FASB, since, as we may discuss a little bit later, official decisions by the FASB are only reach after extensive due process and deliberation. So this is really just from my experience in the 5 months that I've been here. But specific to my role, a lot of what we do is a lot of research, a lot of analyzing comment letters for documents that are issued for public comment, drafting due process documents, drafting technical memorandums for board meetings. So it's definitely a lot more substantive work than I was expecting, which is fantastic because you have a great exposure to technical accounting. And it's just been a great experience thus far. And a PTA, which is the acronym for Postgraduate Technical Assistant, is generally assigned to multiple projects. And in my case, that's been the insurance project, the Private Company Council, or the PCC, and the Small Business Advisory Committee, or SBAC, as it's commonly known.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really great, Brian. I mean, it sounds like you've been involved in a lot of things in just a short period of time since the summer. I'm just curious, after about a half a year of working there, has your impressions of the Financial Accounting Standards Board, and more importantly, GAAP in general, General Accepted Accounting Principles, changed?
I'd say it definitely gives tangibility to the standard setting process. Obviously, we learn about it in school and you know exactly how the process goes, but it really gives you a deep respect for the process as a whole. And I'd say the biggest thing I learned is how much outreach goes on throughout not just the comment letter period, which is what most people think of when you think of outreach with stakeholders, but everything in between, whether it's first in the research agenda, all the way until after a standard goes final, because there's transition resource groups and additional resources to help make sure that the implementation is going smoothly. And in fact, just about 10 minutes ago, I was at the public roundtable for hedging, which was occurring just down the hall. So it's just an extraordinary amount of outreach that goes on, which shows the transparency of the process.
Yeah, I think that's great to kind of highlight to our students that this is a process that involves a lot of people. It's not just a group of 8 or 9 folks from the FASB making these decisions. You do
Sure.
reach out to the public for public comment, and that's what really makes these standards much more applicable to real world when we get that feedback.
Absolutely.
Just moving on, we learned in our first lesson in this course about FASB codification, and you know, a lot of my students realize that there's a tremendous amount of FASB pronouncements out there, which makes it a bit confusing at times.
Sure.
But the codification does make that a whole lot more easy to work with. Do you utilize that tool at all in your current work, or not so much?
I would say definitely. So obviously the FASB codification is the single source of authoritative US GAAP. So the work that we conduct on a daily basis is working to improve everything that's in the codification. And I'd say on a daily basis, I access it in one way or another. And obviously it's a relatively new tool. About, I think 7 years ago, it was rolled out, but it was already included in our curriculum back at U of I, and it's even part of the CPA exam as well. So I think it's definitely been a successful rollout and very convenient to have all authoritative accounting guidance in one area.
Yeah, great. That's perfect, Brian. Now, we also learned in our first lesson of this course that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, has oversight of the FASB. Just curious, in your roughly half a year of work, have you had any interactions with the SEC so far?
Actually, yes, on two occasions on two of my projects, actually. So with the Small Business Advisory Committee, we actually just had a meeting earlier this week. And in this meeting, there were two observers from the SEC, specifically the Office of the Chief Accountant. So they were participating in the meeting as well. And I'd say, secondly, with my insurance project, I guess with any document that's going to be issued, the SEC plays a role in the review process. So anytime, for example, a proposed accounting standard update before that's issued for public comment, that's something that the SEC would take part in reviewing.
Let me move on to a little bit more of a difficult topic. It's a topic we've talked about in our class so far, and it's something we'll certainly go through in the next 11 weeks with my students. But we talk about in our class the differences between general accepted accounting principles and the international financial reporting standards, GAAP versus IFRS. And we kind of joke, and when we talk about this in my video lectures, that there's been this talk of convergence of these two since probably 2002. So it's been a lengthy time. Do you in your current role, do you think there will ever be a successful convergence of U.S. international accounting standards?
That's definitely a difficult question, and obviously just my opinion from my exposure. But I'd say earlier on, international convergence was definitely a high priority. And while it may not be as high now, it's definitely still a goal for essentially every project that's added. That's something in the back of everyone's mind, thinking, okay, perhaps this can be a convergence project. But it's really difficult just to you think about it, you're not just looking for the exact wording in the standard to be similar, but the implementation. And the implementation is much more difficult because financial markets are different. And I definitely think long-term it's a goal, but short-term it would be difficult to 100% converge.
And just kind of a corollary to that, Brian, and this one's kind of something we've talked about in my various classes here at University of Illinois, as well as on the online classes. The one big issue is, for me at least, is historical cost principle. From GAAP, we recommend the historical cost principle for our assets, but IFRS actually allows fair value reporting to some extent. And actually, one of my discussion points in my classes is it's probably one of the few times we actually see that the IFRS might be leaning towards a better way of reporting assets than what we do here in the U.S. Just wanted to get your personal thoughts, not from a FASB perspective, but your personal thoughts. Do you ever think we'll move to more of a fair value reporting?
That's definitely interesting. I think it's something that has obviously been considered, because when you think of fair value, it's more current, it's harder to calculate, and you always have to weigh that balance. And obviously, from a liability perspective, oftentimes fair value is considered. So why not flip it over to the asset side as well? So I definitely think it'll be included in arguments in the future. Whether or not it's adopted, I think is we'll just have to see in the future.
Gotcha. We'll wait and see on that one. Let me move on to some. We're going to move away more from the technical side of your position to a little bit more of, for my students' background, kind of how your preparation here at University of Illinois was in relation to your current role and where you're heading, of course, with Ernst & Young in summer of next summer.
Great.
So first of all, what do you miss most about graduating from University of Illinois, other than being my teaching assistant, of course?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. That was definitely my fondest memory at school. I'd say definitely the people, and not just the students you come to interact with, but professors and everybody. You're with these individuals for, in my instance, 5 years across my undergraduate and graduate degree. So it's definitely hard. You get to have some really meaningful relationships. And while you still stay in touch with some, people are going different areas across the country. And in my case, I wasn't expecting to come to Norwalk, Connecticut, and look where that brought me. But it's wouldn't have changed it at all. And it was really a great experience.
I think I'll just point out as a corollary to Brian's answer, tonight he's actually having dinner with one of our professors from the University of Illinois, Professor Cindy Stewart. So he's still keeping a relationship, which is great to see. We love to have alumni keep those relationships with the university. The next one is, I want to talk about, do you think the University of Illinois prepared you well for your career? I know it's been about a half a year. And Why and what areas maybe could have been improved in that overall educational process?
Long story short, absolutely. Had an absolutely great experience. And outside of the obvious technical accounting, which the University of Illinois has a fantastic accounting curriculum regarding the actual technical accounting skills you receive, I'd say something that may not be focused on in many other schools are communication skills, both written and orally, and critical thinking. So, really ingrained in our curriculum are case studies. And while students may not be a huge fan of those while they are students, in the long run, it really helps out because they're real world instances which can relate to your future career. And wouldn't have given that up. And it's skills that you use on a day to day basis. And I still continue to try to improve upon those.
That's perfect. And actually, just where Brian is not paid to do this interview, but that's a perfect corollary to some of the assignments my students will be getting later this semester with case studies. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Next one is, if you had to provide my ACCE 501 students one piece of advice for future success in just general field of business or specifically accounting, what would that be?
Be curious and ask questions. I tried to start this back in college, and I would spend countless hours in office hours for my professors asking questions, probably to the point where they wanted me to just get out of there. But I really found those meaningful because you started out asking questions about the material, and oftentimes that would branch out into broader accounting theory, future career advice, Illinois football, which generally was more of a somber topic than talking about, not too joyous there. But it's great. And as you mentioned earlier, Greg, you still have these relationships with your professors and you're learning so much more than the textbook, which is very meaningful moving forward. So I'd say start that now with your professors, and then it'll become routine when you get into your career. And you're not expected to know everything once you start your career. So asking questions is the one way to gain that experience.
That's great advice, Brian, and I'm guessing my discussion forum now will explode with questions thanks to that. But that's a great idea. I love questions. That does kind of keep the flow of discussions in and outside the classroom going.
Sure.
My last question for you is kind of a fun one. I know you're from Bloomington, Illinois, just outside of Chicago, suburb of Chicago. So I couldn't recall. I think you're actually a Chicago White Sox fan, but where were you when the Chicago Cubs won the World Series for the first time in 108 years?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So fortunately for me, I was far away from Chicago at the time, being a White Sox fan, but no, it was definitely something I had to watch. So I was sitting on my couch in my apartment in Norwalk, Connecticut with a friend and a roommate, and it was definitely something that you have to watch. It's history for the city of Chicago. So while I definitely wish that it would have been the White Sox in the World Series, it was very cool to watch and exciting to see the reaction on campus and in Chicago. So wish I could have been back, but it was very great to see for the city.
Yeah, I will admit it was a pretty cool sports experience for me, even though I'm originally from the East Coast, to be part of this Cubs kind of euphoria after over 100 years of not having a World Series victory. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
So we'll
absolutely.
hope for better things for University of Illinois football as well as Chicago White Sox in the future. How's that
I'm
sound?
looking forward to it. Let's hope so.
Well, thanks, Brian. This has been, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate the fact that you shared candid answers to help my students both kind of understand some material we've already talked about in my online course, and hopefully fed them some ideas on questions and asking lots of questions about the material in the future. So again, thanks for your time today, Brian. I wish you well. Hopefully it's not too much snow coming your way in Connecticut.
Absolutely. Great talking to you again. Thanks a lot for having me.
So long.